Okay, well, greetings everyone, and welcome to City Lights Live, the online edition of your City Lights events calendar. I'm your host, Peter Maravellis, and tonight, City Lights, in conjunction with our friends at Heyday Books, celebrate the publication of An Indian Among Los Indígenas, a native travel memoir. And we're delighted to have with us its author, Ursula Pike. She's going to be in conversation with Sara Calvosa Olson. As always, we are beaming to you from the unceded ancestral homelands of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, also known as the San Francisco Bay Area. It is always an honor and a privilege to do so. An Indian Among Los Indígenas is no ordinary travel memoir. It follows the journey of Ursula Pike as she struggled with the complexities of serving in Bolivia as a Peace Corps volunteer. An enrolled member of the Karuk Tribe, Ms. Pike sought to make meaningful connections with a well-intentioned attempt at cross-cultural aid. The revelations that emerged from her experiences are highlighted in this remarkable book. Her collision with the effects of colonial history brought her to ask, what does it mean to have experienced the effects of colonialism firsthand, and yet to risk becoming a colonizing force in turn? An Indian Among Los Indígenas rewrites the script for travel writing, adding a depth of intelligence and cultural analysis combined with wit that makes this a really insightful and very rewarding read. Ursula Pike is a graduate of the MFA program at the Institute of American Indian Arts. Her work won the 2019 Writers League of Texas Manuscript Contest in the Memoir category, and her writing has appeared in Yellow Medicine Review, World Literature Today, and Ligeia magazine. She was a Peace Corps fellow at Western Illinois University and served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Bolivia from 1994 through to 1996. An enrolled member of the Karuk Tribe, she was born and raised in California and Portland, Oregon. So joining her in conversation tonight will be Sara Calvosa Olson. Sara Calvosa Olson is an editor, a writer, a storyteller, community development expert, and member of the Karuk Tribe. She is the author of the book Chimi Nuam, Native California Foodways for the Contemporary Kitchen. And she grew up in Salyer and Hoopa in Northern California and makes her home in Marin with her family. And so please join us now in offering a warm welcome to Ursula Pike and Sara Calvosa Olson. So grateful to have you back. Welcome to City Lights.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Yotwa.
Yotwa, thank you.
Yeah. So here we are again, take two, in this exciting event. So I thought we would just sort of have more of a conversation this time, and it's also up to you how you sort of want to format. If you want to start us off with a reading and give us some things to think about, because yeah, I already know the piece that you're going to read, and it's such a good one. Every page of this book was just a delight, and I would love for people to start off with just a little bit of a taste of all of kind of the roller coaster, the emotional roller coaster that I feel when I'm reading this book. I feel like every single emotion, even when I'm cringing or it's all so relatable, So I really think it might be a good start. What do you think?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And thank you for hosting this. Thank you, Peter and City Lights. I was so excited to come back and talk. So yeah, why don't I just start out with reading from page 1, right at the beginning, when I arrived in Bolivia, a la llegada. I arrived in La Paz as 4 rum and cokes joined forces with an altitude-induced headache. The other volunteers in the group had accepted the airline's complimentary drinks, and I assumed this is what people did on international flights. Now I stood in the tiny airport that teetered on the rim of the bowl-shaped valley of the city, feeling exhausted and unprepared. Wood-paneled walls didn't keep out the chilly air blowing across the high plateau. The t-shirt I'd put on the night before in Miami provided no warmth. I forced myself to stand up straight despite wanting to lie down under something soft and warm. It was 7 a.m. and I was 13,000 feet above sea level. I stepped into a quickly forming line leading to a Bolivian immigration official. His pale, pockmarked face and broad, unsmiling cheeks made me wonder whether he was part Indian, native, indigenous. Bolivia had 4 million indigenous people. That was almost twice as many natives as in the United States at that time. In Bolivia, Indians were the majority. I bit my lip to keep from grinning. The Bolivian official scanned passports without a greeting or a smile, quickly looking at each person's face, then back at the passport. I stepped in front of the table where he sat and pulled my stiff passport out of the fanny pack my mother had given me before I left Oregon. Behind him was a shawl-sized painting of the red, yellow, and green Bolivian flag. The other volunteers shuffled toward the immigration official. I had met them only 48 hours earlier, but I already knew exactly how many brown people were in the group. It was a tally I always made. A cute Latina from Texas, a mid-career Mexicano, a bleary-eyed Puerto Rican man, an athletic Filipina from California, and a broad-shouldered Filipino who was quiet except for the occasional self-deprecating joke. I didn't like the term minority, but in this case, we were. The remaining 20 volunteers looked like those combinations of Western and Eastern European identities that qualify as white in the United States. Did anyone wonder what I was? My dark brown hair and olive skin gave me a vaguely ethnic look. Teachers and curious grocery clerks usually guessed Hispanic or maybe Greek. My identity was a tailless donkey they had to pin the right kind of brown to. The immigration official looked up at my face and then down at my passport. I was excited to be standing in front of a Bolivian for the first time, but the formality of the moment made me nervous. His thick eyebrows moved up and down as he scrutinized me. Then he stamped it, handed it back to me, and reached for the next one. That wasn't what I had expected. Thank you for coming to my country. I can tell you are more serious than any of these gringos, said no one. I looked around at the other officials. Didn't my sincerity show through my olive skin? Maybe it was too early in the morning. Maybe they were rushed. I waited an extra moment to give him a chance for a second look or a nod of his head. Certainly, the Bolivians would eventually recognize that I was different from the others arriving from the United States that day. They would see that because I was an American Indian, we shared a connection. Coming to a country like Bolivia, a country full of Native people, had been the secret wish held in my heart as I filled in the spaces on the Peace Corps application. Couldn't they see that my commitment was more meaningful because I was Native? The person behind me sighed, and I reluctantly moved forward.
So good. So what I love about it is just like even the roller coaster and how honest it is. There's so much honesty. And like I said, even the moments where I'm cringing or blushing or I'm just like face palming for you, but I can see all of these things happening to me and the thoughts that are going through your head are so brutally honest sometimes that I'm just, but it resonates with me because I also have those kind of thoughts to the awkwardness, or can't you see that I'm a little bit different, or can't you tell my vibe is different, or something like that. Can't they tell that I come in a better vibe? But all of those things I just felt were so relatable on a deeper level, because when I see travel on Instagram and everybody's making, it's this glamorous thing, and it's really doesn't talk about the feelings that we feel when we're traveling, and why we're traveling to the places that we're traveling to. And I really loved that about your book. And I wanted to know, one of the things as a writer that I found really challenging was how difficult it was to meter out the honesty and the vulnerability. How vulnerable can I be? And how do I balance it with too much? You have an amazing balance of humor. I mean, I laugh out loud, I cry, I cringe, all of those things. But how difficult was it to be this honest and vulnerable?
Right. Well, thank you for all those wonderful things you said. And I think that the really vulnerable, the hardest part sometimes come in a second and third revision. And I teach creative nonfiction and memoir, and that's what I often tell the students, that like this first draft, that's great. You kind of established the story that you want to tell, but on later revisions, that's when you're going to have to dig into the stuff that maybe you're afraid to talk about. And in those early passes through telling that story, you can kind of tell them in a safe space, either just only show it, don't show it to anyone, or to only show it to someone that you trust. But it really is those places where the heat is that you are afraid to write, that are sometimes the thing you absolutely have to write. But then, in revision, you will be able to tell if it's too far. And there are things that I didn't put in there, that I left out, just because, well, sometimes it didn't fit with the story, and that's really what everything has to serve.
Mhm. Right, to serve the story. And you talk about relationships and crushes, and but you're also really generous talking about your joy too, which I loved. How you could almost feel that youthful sense of adventure as you're riding in the back of a truck and eating sugar cane, but then like what happens after you're eating the sugar cane, and the honesty of it. It's just this roller coaster, but it just flows so fast. And I felt like I just wanted to read more, many chapters. So hopefully you are writing more. But other than that, what you do have to really approach some of our heaviest issues and subjects that you are really confronted with at, in this young kind of a naive almost state of confronting these things, but you already have a foundation of understanding of these issues. But knowing what you know now versus Ursula back then, um, how how did Ursula back then grapple with these the commonalities of the colonial violence that you're experiencing, like seeing that you had this in common, and um y- but yet it was still, you were still learning, you were like it's still in a state of learning and understanding in an even broader context. So what,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I think that at the time, I didn't think it mattered. I thought it was unimportant that I could see things that other volunteers didn't see, or had experiences that other volunteers, and I have these like this big stack of journals. My auntie sent me all these journals to fill, and I just wrote and wrote, and I would write stuff in there that I thought, well, it doesn't matter, but something I would notice, or some experience that I would have, I would keep it to myself, because I didn't think it was that important. Like, for example, during training, we were shown a film about how in the 60s, there was a film made about Peace Corps volunteers in Bolivia, and how the film was insinuating that Bolivians were being sterilized by the Peace Corps volunteers, by the Peace Corps. And I remember sitting in that room after watching that movie, and the other volunteers were shocked, just shocked that anybody would ever think that that would happen, that anybody would do that. And in my head, I'm thinking every Native woman, every Native knows that this is a reality up until the late 70s for Indigenous populations in the US. And so it was that kind of a thing. I didn't say that at the time, but that's 100% what I was thinking. And it was only later, as I'm kind of processing my experience when I returned and was writing about it, that I recognized that it did mean something, that I had a different experience, and that I was able to talk about that.
Yeah. And that, I mean, those were some very heavy moments, and a lot of things that you were learning about the process and how these different communities were lifting themselves up and the bureaucracy of what that took. I mean, like I'm thinking about the well and the the community investment and their time and all of that. So you're really grappling with some of these hard things. Did you have anybody that you could really confide in and talk to while you were there about these things that you were grappling with? Or was it something just writing in your journal and hoping you could process later?
Uh, I think that one of the great things about a program like Peace Corps or AmeriCorps or college or anything
Mm,
where people from all different locations come together, um, I was able to identify people who had backgrounds completely different from mine and talk to them. And as time went on, we kind of came to rely on each other. And sometimes I could talk to them about some of the things, but also I was very fortunate in that I was working at a children's home, and there were a number of women that I was working with that I became really close to. And I mean, I definitely made sure that I was able to spend time with them and actually serve them, not just serve the organization, but like go into the kitchen and cut up onions
mm.
and fry eggs and do whatever it is that they needed to build that relationship. And so I was able to talk to them about some of the things. Um,
Oh, that's good. Talking over food. I love it. Do you still bake bread?
I do sometimes. And I grew up, my grandfather had made sourdough bread my whole life growing up. I had a sourdough starter in the refrigerator my entire life. So I was really comfortable when we set upon that idea to have a bakery with the girls at the center.
Mhm.
But it was also amazing to me to see the resourcefulness of them when they're cooking. I was like, oh, let's make this dessert with powdered sugar. They don't go to the store and buy powdered sugar. My friend Teresa was able to actually grind up some sugar and make some powdered sugar. And so it was a great opportunity to share what I knew, but then also to learn from them in that instance.
Yeah. What was your favorite food in Bolivia?
It's funny because in Bolivia is not really known for great food. And but it has some really interesting things. Like there's this sopa de mani, which is like a sort of a savory peanut soup that they put
Mm,
like French fries on the top, and it's really delicious. And then empanadas, they make empanadas, and they make these like mashed potato balls filled with things. So it's like a mashed potato with like a meat pie, but with mashed potatoes. Anyway, just delicious stuff. Um,
mhm.
and it's great, and but it's difficult to recreate. And there's almost no Bolivian restaurants in the U.S. But
Yeah, I don't even think that I don't think I've had Bolivian food or seen it around, but I love the idea of a savory peanut soup. That sounds amazing. So, did you, when you are, you go through all this, did you always think that you were going to write a travel memoir? You were a journaling person before and during. And did you have some thoughts about while you were journaling that this would be something that you would pull together into a cohesive memoir, or was it just your habit, the way that you just, you were in the habit of journaling, or was it something that you were thinking about these experiences in terms of like pulling them together?
I don't think it was until afterwards that I thought I should pull these together. I mean, just recognizing that I had a different experience, and I always was looking at books to see if there was anything similar. and wasn't really finding anything, at least in book form. I would see other things, like I remember seeing blog posts by African Americans who were serving in Africa or talking to other volunteers about their experience, and recognizing that there were things that I experienced that they experienced, that there were similarities, but nobody ever really talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was those conversations that made me realize, oh, well, there's not a book like what I want to help me understand my experience, so I'm gonna write it. And I was very fortunate that I was able to take a bunch of classes at Austin Community College, and there were a lot of really encouraging instructors who pointed out, that there aren't a lot of stories like this, and so or published books like this. So it was exciting to me to get that encouragement and move forward with it.
Mm-hmm. And now you teach memoir writing.
Yeah, I teach. I've been teaching at Austin Community College for a couple years, and I really enjoy working with students, often students who are taking the class who haven't ever thought about getting anything published. Maybe they're just trying to meet a credit, and
Mm-hmm.
or they are applying to law school, so they're like taking a writing class to help them work on their application. And just to see these stories that people have that are so interesting, and that they never really thought about how interesting their life was, and to read all these stories from these students, it's very exciting to me to see the variety of experiences, and to help people figure out how to tell their story.
Right. And I feel like that is what you do so successfully, is tell this story without holding. It feels like you're not holding very much back because of how honest you are throughout it and how emotional it is. And I think that's really one of my favorite things, is actually having a travel memoir, which feels very natural. As a native person, we weren't static, we didn't stay in one place, and we did travel, and we spoke to each other, and we brought our words back home. I mean, we had more of an oral travel memoir style in talking about the places we've been, and who, the people that we met and our experiences there and what we learned. And I do feel there's a lot of learning happening, a lot of internal learning, and on your part, and finding your voice and your joy and every opportunity. But there were some hardcore moments there where I would not have stuck it out, and you stuck it out, and it was like mind blowing to me. So how did you push yourself through some of those really brutal moments? And how did you see, like, you did not punch out, you kept going, you stayed in it, and uh yeah, and again went through some incredibly difficult things. And how did you get through those, and how did you manage to stay?
Well, I mean, it may sound stereotypical. I mean, I just thought of my grandma all the time. Like my grandma, she's now walked on, but she was such a powerful force in my life, and I wanted to make her proud. And I was, the only grandkid to go to college, and I really wanted to be successful, to try as hard as I could to be successful. And so that got me through. And I mean, but also really those relationships with those Bolivians helped me a lot. The romantic relationship that helped too, but also the connection with the women. And I really think in the end, those friendships that I made with those women are the thing that kept me going through it. Because even if they didn't necessarily understand my specific issues that I was going through. You know, they were women who would talk to me, and we would sit and do each other's hair or whatever. We would connect as women, as humans, and that was really important to keep me going. And that's who I've really stayed in touch with over the years since I returned from Bolivia. And I've gone back to Bolivia a couple times, and that's who I go and see. Is I stay with those women when I'm visiting.
Yeah, there were some moments in this that where I felt like there was even like there was like there were instinctual moments where they felt there or they were anticipating your needs the way women do and in those situations, anticipating your needs with the laundry and helping you and but you know, you still feeling that you were really wanted to stand on your own feet and you didn't want to ask too much and you're balancing this dichotomy, I guess, of being, you know, feeling not wanting to perpetuate these colonial you know, violences upon them and you know expect them to be in service of you when you're there to be in service of them and trying to communicate that to them. And do you feel that they understood what you were there for, that you were there to be in service of their communities? Or like by the end, now you've been back a couple of times, so I'm sure they must know your heart by now. But it did feel that there was a lot of, you know, you trying to get it across that you were here for them and you're going to work hard, even though like it was exhausting. There was long, long, exhausting days. So,
Yeah, well, and I don't know, you know, I've asked, like, been asked a version of this question before, where if I think there was any impact by what I did, and I don't know that there was. I mean, I know there was an impact on me, and then of course the connection that I made with people there. But as far as like income generating projects or anything like that, I don't know that there was, but I'm okay with that. I mean, I am humble enough to realize that, you know, a 2-year stint when I had very little previous experience, it wasn't going to change the world, and it shouldn't change the world. It's their world, and if, but I do feel like I was able to connect with them and make I don't know. For me, really, the change that happened was to me, more so than to them.
yeah. And you can definitely see this in this memoir. One of the cool things about this in paperback now is that it has in the back a discussion guide for like a book club or for your school. I don't know if you can see it. I've got a blurring thing on, but there's a discussion guide in here, and I wanted to ask one of the questions. So, and I always love a paperback for this purpose. So, it makes me just think deeper. And I didn't know this before, but the librarians at the Lake Forest Library in Illinois developed the questions, which
Yeah,
I love.
they were wonderful. They hosted a reading event, like a several month
Mhm.
event where people read my book in the community, and then they brought me there, and it was great because we were able to have discussions. But they had developed those list of questions, and so when the paperback was coming out, I reached out to them, and it had been so fruitful for discussion at the event that I was really grateful to them for sharing them. I love librarians, and I
Me
was
too.
I was so excited to be able to include them in this
Mm.
paperback.
I know. I wish they would do it for cookbooks. Give me some questions, librarians. I love them. They're just the best. They're so thoughtful, and I am a huge fan of librarians as well. And also, I noticed that there's an audiobook coming out. I love audiobooks. I do a lot of traveling, a lot of driving. I mean, a lot. So I tear through audiobooks, and so I saw that there was an audiobook coming out in May.
Yes, yes, I'm really excited about that. It's coming out. I'm not reading it. Someone who is a
Ooh.
professional narrator will be reading it, and so I'm. But I'm excited about that as well. So I'm very fortunate that in this year, both the paperback and the audiobook are coming out.
Yeah. Have you had a chance to listen to the audiobook yet?
No, I haven't. But I've heard excerpts from the
Okay.
author. I mean the narrator of other things
Mhm.
she's read, and she's great. She's great. So
Wow. Okay, well, I just want to ask one question from this book, this list, and I liked the first one, I think. So, in the preface, you mention your affection for travel narratives, despite your discomfort with the depiction of Indigenous populations in your favorite travel stories. Do travel narratives have a tendency toward voyeurism and conquest? And how is your perspective different from those of many other travel writers?
well, I recently came across a quote that I really love. I'm reading this book called Me But Better by Olga Kazan, which is about how we're all
Mm.
obsessed with trying to make ourselves like better. But she quoted Fernando Pessoa, who was a Portuguese poet and writer. And he said, "Travel is the traveler. What we see isn't what we see, but what we are." And I really love that. I think that that is it in a nutshell. What makes this book different, but other books or other travel narratives different based on the person who is observing them. Um,
Mhm.
and I mean, I see that now. There's a great YouTube series called Traveling While Black, and this couple
Mhm.
traveled all over, and they traveled around the Oregon coast, and they give their perspective as African Americans traveling in on the Oregon coast, and I love it. I love their perspective, and I think, to me, that's what I am really interested in: people who have different life experiences, and seeing what their perspective is on places that they go.
Yeah. And that also reminds me of one of the parts that will probably forever stick with me because of how much it makes me think about the way that I travel. But and when you talk about the difference between travelers and tourists, and the grandmother that's riding the bus, and to her this is an upgrade from her previous transportation experiences, and as opposed to the person who considers himself sort of a down to earth traveler who's taking the bus and trying to see the countryside, and, from a more of a local perspective, and they have this different kind, they don't consider themselves tourists necessarily, but yet, they're on the bus, and and they're thinking, wow, I'm really like getting down with the local people here in this transportation, but really the grandmother's like, this is like fancy. Like, as a compared to what she would have before, which was either just her feet or something else. So yeah. I
Yeah, it's so important, and that's what I tell
Mhm.
my kids: just understand the context of the place that you're going, the history, their history, and your history, and be mindful of that as you travel. So
Yeah. And I'm thinking about just ways that when I travel, I can be more present or have less of an impact, and be more thoughtful. It is challenging. I don't think that we're sort of taught that we just sort of go everywhere, and everywhere is the world is our oyster. We can just prod wherever we like, and the point, like you said, is that we're the traveler, and travel is about the traveler, so it's about us, and it's kind of got a it's really like how we see ourselves as the people traveling in this country or in a separate country. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that the what I realized, and it is at the conclusion of the book, is that I recognize that it wasn't the duty of the Bolivian to figure out that I was different. It's my role, it's my responsibility to recognize that I I know from my own experience and from what I've studied that that history and the context, and so I need to behave accordingly. So I see that there are some questions in
Yeah. It
the
looks like we have
chat.
a yeah, okay. It looks like we have one here. It's from Nancy Helgeson. In a country like Bolivia with an indigenous majority, there must be there must be a better conservation of language and culture than here, where there was a deliberate campaign of indigenous erasure. Could you talk about the differences?
Yeah, well, in Bolivia, there has been a growing recognition of the importance of the Quechua and Aymara language. And that's happened since I was there. When I went back in 2018, I think it was, I remember I was sitting at a cafe in Cochabamba, which is a pretty big city, and these kids had just come back from school and they were telling their parents, look what I learned, these words in Quechua. So they were teaching Quechua in the schools, and they weren't doing that in when I was there. So those are some changes, but there's also a lot of exciting things happening here. I mean, I know with our tribe, there's a ton of language programs that are happening. I see the Karuk word of the day. My daughter's always sending me Karuk memes. And there are funds, there used to be federal funds
Mm.
supporting indigenous language learning, but there's a lot of work that people are doing, tribes and tribal members are doing to teach young people the language and recognizing that the language is the culture.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know that there wasn't a deliberate campaign of indigenous erasure in Bolivia. And in fact, I mean, as Karuk people, we were contacted very relatively late comparatively. I would assume that Bolivians or Quechua peoples were contacted probably 100, 200 years before us, even possibly, because we didn't experience really first contact. On the Klamath River until 1849 gold rush when they come from Humboldt Bay and go up the Klamath River to blast mine for gold. So that was really our first contact, but it was fast and thorough for the most part. We scattered quite a bit, and they had already had a pretty robust boarding school system going on, and the California governor was very anti-indigenous and it was already campaigning, and this was our third wave of genocidal experiences, I guess. But again, we didn't have a lot of Spanish contact like the way we did with the gold rush. So I'm sure they have been enduring even longer.
Well,
So
and in Bolivia, because there are so many indigenous communities there, it's similar to in the US, how there were some people, the Aymara people who were closer to Peru, were in contact with Spanish colonizers earlier than others, but there not still, but there are tribes who only in the 20th century were in contact because they lived on
mm,
that border with Brazil and Bolivia, which is the Amazon. So
mhm,
I think that you're right in the same way that it's been different for tribes. Contact in the US has been, or in North America, it's also that way in South America and Bolivia. The timeline is different for every tribe.
mhm.
So
Yeah, but the playbook is still the same.
the
It's
playbook is still the same. Yes.
it is, yeah, and the playbook is still the same, and the things that they were talking about there were things that had been happening in North America as well, like the forced sterilization, and yeah, it was. it's all very similar. And, just relocating, disconnection, language, trying all of those things, so disconnection from the land. And you do talk about the challenges that they are trying to regain their agricultural sovereignty and their food sovereignty. uh, and language is a good start. It's everything is all interconnected, how it is with our language. So food sovereignty, and that's the work that I do primarily, is in food sovereignty. But it is such um an enormous umbrella. There are so many aspects of food sovereignty, and storytelling, art, agriculture, forestry, all of those different things that come together, science and community and language and everything. It all falls under that umbrella of just, food sovereignty and sovereignty in general. And how have things progressed for them in their sovereignty? And I know that you were observing them putting in the well, and so how are things going for those communities?
It's been uneven,
Mhm.
definitely. And it's really complicated because in 2006 or 2008, they elected their first Indigenous president. And he served for 2 terms, and then he left. And many Bolivians didn't like him. Even Indigenous Bolivians didn't like him, but they also had benefited from some of this increased recognition of Indigenous heritage of Bolivians, of Quechuas and Aymaras. And so it definitely was complicated. And now someone else is in office, and it is it's, when I talk to my friends there, they are definitely struggling economically. And so, but they've had some really good years, and some really lean years for sure.
Mhm. We stay plugging on, keeping at it. Mhm. Stay
There,
fighting.
there was one thing I was going to mention, is that, one thing that I struggle with is just this whole issue of being Indian enough, and representing an Indigenous identity in different ways, especially as somebody who would go to Happy Camp and go up there, but would definitely spent the majority of my time in Daly City and Portland, and with urban Native communities. And I saw a similar thing happening in Bolivia, so for example, the helper at the children's home, the cook's helper, one day she came to me and said she was thinking of not wearing her pollera, because in Bolivia, young women, especially Indigenous women, have a specific clothes that they wear, a skirt and a hat, and they wear their hair in braids. And it's different at different places in the country, but she was like deciding if she should consciously stop dressing in a traditional way, stop being visibly Native, even though she was Quechua. And ultimately, she decided not to. And I knew that was hard for her, but I also recognized, like in my own family, decisions that, for example, my grandmother made to go to Oakland and work as a maid, to leave Happy Camp, and that difficult decision to do something different than your mother or any of your ancestors have done, just for economic security. Like that, those hard decisions that women especially, but Natives and Indigenous people all over the world are faced with, where it feels like you have to make a choice between culture and economic survival.
Yeah. In practical living, just in this world. And it was something, and it was like they were really prohibitively expensive to wear their traditional dress or traditional. I forget what it is now, but they have the hats, right, and the
Mhm.
and the outfit, and yeah. But still, if it that is also kind of a colonial mechanism as well, and making it difficult to access your traditional regalia.
Right.
And yeah.
And that's how I see Bolivians now, dressing as cholitas or wearing those traditional outfits as regalia. So sort
Mm,
of how we will go to ceremony, go to powwows, and wear the regalia. They will wear them at specific events or specific ceremonies or for beauty contests or
mhm,
things like that.
mhm,
And that, they're consciously deciding, this is the time when I will put on the hat, put on the skirts. But you're
mhm,
right, they are very, very expensive.
mhm. Yeah, and we have a lot of revitalization happening in that department as well, with the return of the flower dance and the regalia making with the young girls in communities, all like in not just Karuk people, but Yurok and Hupa people. They have big groups now of women coming together to, and men coming together to help create this regalia for these young girls that are doing their flower dance. And but again, that is also challenging, and to come up with the materials for it. And even now, like with Joanne's closing,
Oh,
I
yes, that's
I
right.
mean, come on. I mean, and when you're in a really rural area, there's not a lot of options, and that is really a bummer. I'm surprised she can close with how much money I've given. I'm like, what are you doing with all my money, Joanne? Okay, I've been going there forever. But thought I was putting you through college, but yeah, so that is challenging too. And being remote and not having access to
Mhm.
textiles and materials, and or in some cases, like, we can't gather abalone anymore on the California coast. There are other reasons too, where where regalia is scarce for other reasons also. So really complicated history,
Yes,
and a lot of context to,
yes.
like, just a lot of history and context there. But I think we're supposed to wrap up, but does anybody have any last questions
And as
or
people are thinking that,
comments?
I want to make sure to put a plug for your book. Oh my gosh, it's great. And let me just read this beginning of the squash fry bread recipe. Good news, decolonizing our diets is a spectrum and we don't have to do it all at once. In our communities, the Indian taco is both emblematic of oppression and a symbol of survival and cultural diversity. Plus, how are we going to raise money for the all Indian basketball tournament or the 8th grade trip if we don't have a few Indian taco sales? But maybe we can make it 1 degree healthier by adding some squash to our fry bread dough. I love this book because it's so full of culture and it's hilarious and it's practical. So I just want to make sure everybody knows about that book.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, and I feel the same way about yours. And I think that must be what it is that I appreciate, is that we tackle some really hard stuff. Things that could put you curled up in a ball forever. But we tackle hard stuff, and there's something about it, about a sense of humor, a native sense of humor in the face of these things that they like. And in your book, it breaks at just the right place, the part where you feel like this is too much to contemplate, and then there's just like one, just a few words, and the economy of hilarity. In that way, there's like an economy of hilarity, and maybe that's what it is knowing that we have to diffuse the anxiety so we can keep moving forward. And so there's a like maximum hilariousness in a short economy of words. And I loved that about this because I would be ready to, just on the edge of my seat, but then I'm laughing out loud, like, oh my gosh, or blushing at for you, or or whatever it is, or just sort of like face palming, like, yeah, I would have done the same thing. I would have eaten the sugar cane as well. So I hope that everybody picks this paperback up, and I know that you're going to tear through it and you're going to laugh and you're going to cry and you're going to freak out. So, and I hope there's more. Do you have another? Are you writing more travel memoirs? It's okay if you don't want to answer, because I know that we share a publisher, and I wouldn't want anybody to ask me that question. so,
Yeah,
so it's
I
okay.
just I lived in Mississippi right when I was pregnant with my first child, and the Mississippi Band of the Choctaw Indians were very helpful to me. And so I'm writing about that whole experience of being a California Indian in Mississippi, and but yeah, it's a similar but different experience. So
Yeah, a Karuk among los Choctaws. I love it. Sounds delightful. I cannot wait. So, yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And I don't know if I need to have the moderator come in
Oh,
here. Oh,
well, I
there he is.
really wanted to thank the both of you for gracing our virtual halls, and it's been such a pleasure and a delight. And Ursula Pike, congratulations on this wonderful, wonderful new book. And Sara, thank you so much for doing the honors and being with us again. And much gratitude to you both. Special thanks to our friends over at Heyday Books for knowing a good thing when they see it. A big shout out to Emmerich Ecklam, who's actually in the audience with us tonight. And I also like to thank the rest of you in the audience for spending time with us as well. We have posted links in the chat, as I mentioned before, with which you may purchase copies. And better yet, if you're in the hood, come on down, pay us a visit, browse our stacks. We are one of the great browsing experiences in the Bay Area. We're located in San Francisco's historic North Beach district. We're open 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And of course, this program has been made possible by support from the City Lights Foundation, fostering an active engagement with books and literary culture. Please be well. We hope to see you all again soon. Take care.
Yo, toi.
bye. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.